Welcome to the Debrief here at ABC News Live. I'm Aaron Katersky in New York. Coming up, House Democrats are seizing on a new report about the president's former fixer and lawyer. We'll go to our senior justice correspondent. We're also talking about the crisis at the border and why it seems more children were separated from their families than first thought. And parts of the country are in for a whole lot of snow. We'll get you caught up on the weather after these headlines.
It's back to the bargaining table again today for teachers in LA, now into day 5 of their strike.
We're bargaining hard and we're organizing on the ground hard. Okay, and we've got to continue that. We're going to push to do as much as we can over the weekend. This may very well go into next week.
Scientists now think Saturn may have spent almost its entire existence without rings. An Italian-led team finds Saturn's primary rings appear to be 10 million to 100 million years old compared to the planet, which is 4.5 billion years old.
Before the Super Bowl kicks off, Gladys Knight will be singing. She's been tapped to perform the Star-Spangled Banner this year. The 7-time Grammy winner says she's proud to use her voice to, quote, unite and represent her hometown of Atlanta. The 74-year-old was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996.
Cut packs are coming to Tesla.
In a company-wide email this morning, Elon Musk seems to acknowledge that he may have allowed his electric car company to grow too quickly by boosting his workforce by 30% last year in order to ramp up production of the lower-priced Model 3 variant in the coming months. Musk says he's reluctantly letting about 3,100 employees go.
The NFL's championship Sunday is coming up with the Rams facing the Saints and the Patriots against the Chiefs.
A thrilling upset at the Australian Open this morning. Maria Sharapova beat defending champ Caroline Wozniacki 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. Sharapova moves on to the 4th round.
We're going to begin here with Michael Cohen, the president's former fixer and attorney. Democrats in the House of Representatives are vowing to get to the bottom of a new report out of BuzzFeed that suggests President Trump directed or instructed Michael Cohen to lie when he testified before Congress about a project to build a Trump-branded skyscraper in Moscow. For more on this, we're joined by our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, in Washington. Pierre, we have not been able to independently verify this report here at ABC News, but if true, it's potentially significant.
Well, if it is true, and if Mueller, the special counsel team, can corroborate this information, it would be significant because it would suggest that the president would have been involved in potentially obstructing justice. Again, ABC News is not confirmed and cannot corroborate the story. We're doing our own reporting on the story, trying to check this out. But again, if true, it's potentially significant, which is why you hear the Democrats on Capitol Hill calling for a congressional investigation and using the I word, impeachment.
And they've used that word before, and whether this is the tipping point or not, we'll see. But the story is interesting because it doesn't necessarily appear to come from Cohen himself, but rather suggests there are documents or potential witness statements that may be able to prove this.
Well, again, that's going to be the key because what we know is that the Mueller investigation tends not to depend on any particular one witness, that each witness, the special counsel wants to have additional information to corroborate, to confirm what that witness is telling them. And Cohen is a person who, again, he pled guilty to lying to Congress. So this is a person who has the potential to lie. So given that circumstance, the Mueller team is going to want to prove everything that comes out of his mouth.
Michael Cohen is scheduled to come to Capitol Hill next month to testify before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Other committees are begging for his testimony, and whether Senator Amy Klobuchar knew about this BuzzFeed report or not, we're not sure, but there was an interesting moment when she was conversing with the nominee to be the next Attorney General, Bill Barr, pressing him about obstruction of justice.
You wrote on page 1 that a president persuading a person to commit perjury would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Or
and-
any person who persuades
person.
another to, yeah.
Okay. You also said that a president or any person convincing a witness to change testimony would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Democrats trying to maybe box the new Attorney General nominee into a corner, Pierre?
Potentially, but again, at the end of the day, this case is going to be built or not on whatever evidence Bob Mueller can find to lay out what did or did not happen. And again, the point of emphasis here is that whatever Michael Cohen may have said to the special counsel, there's going to have to be a lot of evidence to go to support it.
ABC's Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice correspondent with us from Washington. Pierre, thanks. Let's turn to the White House now and ABC's Karen Travers. Any indication that the White House is prepared to talk about this new BuzzFeed report, Karen?
Aaron, there have been no tweets yet from President Trump, and we do have the first reaction of sorts from the administration. Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley was asked about the BuzzFeed report during an interview with Fox News in the last hour, and he didn't deny it directly, but instead, and look for this to be the lines from the administration, he tried to discredit Michael Cohen. That's something we've seen from the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and something we've seen from officials here over the last few months when it comes to Michael Cohen's credibility. Even the president himself has questioned that and pointed out that Cohen has admitted to lying before, so why can you trust him now? But again, no direct denial of this report from a deputy press secretary here at the White House.
And Rudy Giuliani said, if you believe Michael Cohen, I can get you a good deal on the Brooklyn Bridge. But be that as it may, the White House is focused on day 28 of the government shutdown. Any breakthroughs coming, Karen?
No breakthroughs. There hasn't even been an inch of progress in about 10 days now. It was a week and a half ago when the president sat down with Republican and Democratic leaders here at the White House. He walked out of that meeting after 14 minutes, Aaron, and declared it a total waste of time. And since then, there has been nothing, no conversation between the president and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Senate leader. So here we are now on day 28, and the White House and Team Pelosi are engaging in what some are calling petty and vindictive politics, what others are calling sophomoric responses. Where things stand now, Speaker, of course, sent that letter to the president saying, let's talk about postponing the State of the Union. The president canceled her trip to Afghanistan yesterday, postponed, I should say, not allowing her to use a military plane. And then Pelosi today pointing the finger at the president for endangering the security of the delegation, members of Congress, and the security that was going along with them to Afghanistan. They say he leaked her plans to travel by commercial aircraft, and they were informed overnight that this would just be not a safe trip to make to Afghanistan, so Nancy Pelosi's trip is now off.
And Karen, you mentioned how these tactics are being viewed. There was one article of the New York Times likening them to a sandbox dispute among children. But is there a sense that there's an adult in the room who's going to bring this all together?
You know, any sense of that in the last 2 weeks, I would say. You know, these efforts to maybe bring together some moderates and strike a deal that could be presented to the president and to Democratic leaders, it's gone nowhere. And everybody's digging in their heels right now. The president at the Pentagon yesterday, I traveled out there with him for his remarks. He made it very clear he wants a border wall. The Democrats say they're not going to give it to him. So at this point, we don't know what the tipping point is going to be that would make everybody open their eyes a bit more or suddenly wake up and say, oh, we have to fix this right now. A lot of speculation about what that could be. Maybe a big drop in the stock market, concerns about investors, more signs about lost productivity and economic growth. But for now, all of that combined with these stories of the federal workers impacted personally by this shutdown, nothing has made anybody move an inch.
ABC's Karen Travers on the government shutdown about to enter its 5th week. Karen, our thanks to you. As Karen notes, at the heart of the dispute over the shutdown is the border. And so we want to take you now to ABC's Matt Gutman because there is a new report from the Department of Health and Human Services that more children were separated at the border than first thought. Matt with his reporting now.
Aaron, that internal report by Health and Human Services basically says that through miscommunication, it underestimated, or the ultimate number of children who were separated from their families was underestimated by thousands of children. So during that 45-day period when family separation was actually Trump administration policy. About 2,700 kids were separated from their parents. But we've also learned through this report that that policy, even though it wasn't policy, actually had begun before that in 2017, and possibly thousands of children were separated. It still happens today, and that happens when parents come across the border seeking asylum from the U.S. government and have some sort of criminal record or felonies in their past. And once their names are entered into the system, it's found that they do have a record. They are separated, sometimes only temporarily, from their children. But it obviously is something very traumatic. Customs and Border Patrol says that it does its best to provide for those kids, but its facilities simply aren't geared to handling that many children, certainly not families. One of the things that we've seen is this incredible video of asylum seekers, a group of 376 of them coming across the border. And you can see that in this video. They're just lingering around the border wall, waiting for Border Patrol to pick them up. It took hours to process them because there were so many. 330 parents and children, 176 children alone, many of them young, I'm told, by Border Patrol. It took so long to actually get them into the detention facility because they've never had a group this large. Now, what they did is actually tunnel beneath a wall not too dissimilar from this one. It was actually in a sandy area of the border wall, and you can just dig into it with your hands. And apparently smugglers tried to dig about 14 holes. 7 of them actually worked and were able to get all of their people across in a short amount of time. And it wasn't until all of them were on the U.S. side of the border that they were actually detected. So one of the things that, in terms of a barrier that Customs and Border Protection is asking for, is not necessarily fencing like this or a wall. They want a holistic system that includes sensors on the ground and cameras up above that can help them detect when smugglers are actually trying to go through. And what's incredible from our border tour is that we've seen smugglers who've been able to dig tunnels beneath, that they've pulled the fence back, that they've actually cut through it using welding gear. So there are many ways that people can get through. What CBP says is that no wall or fence is completely impenetrable, but what they hope is that a better system will give them just a little bit more time to react to these asylum seekers. Aaron.
ABC's Matt Gutman, our chief national correspondent on the border in Arizona. I want to turn next to Congresswoman Veronica Escobar of Texas, Democrat, who represents not only a border region, but is also on the House Judiciary Committee now. Congresswoman, it's good to have you with us. Are you confident, based on the latest report from Health and Human Services, that you now know the full story about family separation at the border?
Hi, Aaron. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on. I am absolutely not confident. I think that the depth of the horror of family separation is yet unknown. I will tell you, those of us here in El Paso last summer, we were sounding the alarm to leaders, legislators, reporters, that we knew the numbers that were being shared with the country about the number of families separated, that was an underestimation. And we knew that because the counting started in April of last year. But we knew that in El Paso, the family separation practice began the summer before that, in June or July 2017. So we knew that the numbers were greater, and we kept asking for information. We kept asking for transparency. Of course, none of that happened. I think that it will take the oversight of the Judiciary Committee and other committees, now that the Democrats have control of the House, to really fully understand the magnitude of what happened under the Trump administration family separation policy.
It was almost paradoxical, though, in pushing to end the policy of family separation, it seemed to have the effect of potential immigrants bringing more children to the border, realizing now that the United States would no longer separate families. So how do you prevent that, and what's the remedy here?
That's a great question. And there are two challenges that we face as a country. Number one, the long-term challenge, because I'll tell you, I would agree that the current state of affairs is unsustainable. We have been seeing families seeking asylum, leaving their home countries in the Northern Triangle for at least 4 years. So this is not new. We've got to deal with what's happening in Central America, or this will not stop. And in fact, with climate change and with other challenges, the number of asylum-seeking families will only continue to grow if we continue to sit on our hands. But then there's also the short-term challenges. The Trump administration has chosen to address these short-term challenges with incompetence and cruelty. The Department of Homeland Security is one of the most well-funded federal law enforcement agencies. In fact, it gets more money than all other federal law enforcement agencies combined. It's been unable to be nimble enough and strategic enough to adequately deal with the new reality on the border, which is families seeking asylum. So we really have to tackle this situation on two fronts. And we've got to use compassion, and we've got to recognize that yes, there are many families coming across the southern border. We also need to have some context. I mean, I'd be very curious to see during other surges of asylum-seeking individuals, what have those surges looked like, and how do these numbers compare? And I would be willing to bet that while the numbers are tremendous right now, we have seen far more asylum seekers in the past. But it's about how we deal with it on the front lines. And as you just heard, a wall doesn't do it. A wall doesn't change anything.
Are you going to use your position on the Judiciary Committee, Congresswoman, to push for testimony from Secretary Nielsen?
Absolutely.
When might that happen?
You know, I just got appointed, 48 hours ago. And I will tell you, Chairman Nadler is an incredible leader. And he came to the border. He came to El Paso. He toured the facilities. He and I have had conversations about how we begin to address the situation. And I'll be working closely with him and with other leaders on the committee to explore the best avenues. But we have to get to the bottom of this. Why have we been sending so much money to this agency? Why has it been unable and ill-equipped to deal with the current situation? Why did 2 children die in their custody? And how do we prevent this from happening again?
Congresswoman, we look forward to the answers that you're able to provide to the country on this pressing issue. Congresswoman Veronica Escobar of Texas, Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, our thanks to you. And we're going to move on to another problem for another part of the country, and that's the weather. The map shows some significant snowfall coming, and so we turn to ABC's Whit Johnson from Boston now. Whit.
Aaron, Boston is no stranger to major snowstorms, but this is preparation. The city determined to keep people safe as these storms roll in. Take a look at all of this salt, mountains of it here. What they do is, ahead of the snowflakes, they sprinkle this on the roads, making sure they reduce the risk and the danger from all of that ice that could form. 300,000 tons of salt just here in Boston. They also have another 45,000 tons they're expecting on Monday, all of it shipped in from Egypt. They've got 150 trucks ready to go to distribute and deploy this salt to the areas that need it most. And it's not just Boston, the entire Northeast. We're talking New York, New Jersey, many of these big cities that were taken by surprise from that last major winter storm in November. You'll remember that gridlock on the roads, people snowed in, they couldn't move. Major cities want to avoid that from happening again. So they are preparing. They've got the salt at the ready. We did have a dusting of snow overnight. Wasn't much. The big one, though, expected to roll in overnight Saturday into Sunday. That could bring up to a foot or more of snow in some places throughout New England. Now, you would think Sunday not as much of a concern on the roads, but that's not the case here in Boston because a huge game, the Patriots taking on the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. They are expecting millions of people to be out, hopefully celebrating for them, but cheering on Tom Brady and the Patriots. So they are urging people who will be out on those slick roads to be careful. Aaron?
ABC's Whit Johnson, literally on the Egyptian salt that's going to be on American roads. helping to prevent some accidents as the winter storm bears down. Our thanks to Whit. On the other side of the country, it is day 5 of the teacher strike in Los Angeles. ABC's Romina Puga is there, and we're going to come back to her in a minute because we understand there's going to be a human chain forming in that teacher strike. So we're going to get to Romina right now. Romina, it's good that you can hear us and we can hear you. Day 5 of this LA teacher strike, and word that a human chain is forming to unite all of these protesters?
That's true, Aaron. We're here at Colfax Avenue Elementary School, where a human chain of teachers, students, and parents have formed 3 schools in the district, almost a mile long, and they're standing in solidarity. Yesterday, the 2 sides resumed negotiations, but they're still picketing today. There's a rally expected in a couple hours back at City Hall. They're expecting a bigger turnout than Monday's, which was 50,000 people. It's the first day where it's not raining on these strikers, so that'll be a bigger protest. And, I just want to put in perspective, attendance has been low all week. It's been 5 days of teachers striking. That's cost the state almost $100 million in funding that's tied directly to attendance. And I want to bring you over here to Scott Mandel, who's a teacher of 36 years and a UTLA rep. So yesterday, negotiations started. You were telling me it lasted 13 hours?
Actually 12 hours, till midnight.
Yeah.
And at midnight, and they're starting again at 11 this morning.
And is there any word on what was discussed?
No, they're keeping quiet on it, but there had to be something good going on for them to be sitting that long.
Yeah.
Because the union will not sit with the district unless there's some progress being made.
And are they meeting again today?
Yes, at 11 o'clock this morning.
At 11 o'clock. And the rally's at 10:30, so
yes.
that's...
So our negotiating team will miss the rally.
And are these rallies and strikes expected to continue Monday?
It's starting Tuesday, all next week.
Okay.
I mean, the community support we're getting, this is organized by parents. And we have thousands of people here. The support we're getting from the community is amazing.
Yeah.
Loyola Marymount just did a survey that's found that over 80% of the public supports this teacher strike.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
Aaron?
Romina, you mentioned negotiations there with Scott. Is there a sign that these negotiations are actually going anywhere?
They're not releasing any information, but like Scott said, because it lasted until 1 in the morning and they're meeting again today at 11, we're thinking that something is happening. But again, they're saying that there are just fundamental disagreements on key issues. So we'll have to see what comes from these negotiations.
Fair enough, Romina. Our thanks to you there on the picket line in Los Angeles on day 5 of this teacher strike. Overseas to London now, and ABC's Julia McFarlane, where Prince Philip is recovering after a car accident. 97-year-old Prince was driving, hit another car. Julia, the first thought of many was, why is he driving himself?
Well, Aaron, what can I say? Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, he's very much his own man. He's retired from public life. He retired 18 months ago. And he is very often spotted driving around on their private estates, either in Windsor or in Sandringham. The Queen herself, of course, is known to drive herself from time to time. But what happened yesterday, really stunning pictures of this very serious car crash. Prince Philip's Land Rover flipped onto its side with the brute force of this collision. Now, he came into contact with an SUV with 2 women and a 9-month-old baby. Now, those 2 women, one was 28 and the other was 45. They were both treated in a nearby hospital for minor injuries. One of the women had some cuts. The other woman broke her wrist. Thankfully, the baby was unharmed. And as for the Duke of Edinburgh, that's his title, also Prince Philip, he was helped out of the car, either through the windscreen or the sunroof. A witness described as helping to pull him out because, of course, the car was on its side. And he was described as being very shaken and very shocked. But one of the first things he did was he asked about the condition of the women in the other vehicle. But thankfully, everyone walked away miraculously, really. When you look at the pictures, there was a wing mirror and broken glass thrown on the other side of the road, which just demonstrates how serious and how forceful that collision yesterday was.
I had heard an interview with the gentleman who had helped Prince Philip from the vehicle, and he seemed to rather stunned to realize who it was behind the wheel.
Yeah, so this accident happened at a junction. One of the roads was a private road leading to Sandringham, but the junction where this occurred, it's a very busy main road in Norfolk. Loads of traffic passes there each day. The speed limit is 60 miles an hour, but they have now revised that down to 50 miles an hour because there have been accidents there in the past. Now, a lot of people have been asking about whether the Duke of Edinburgh really should be driving at the age of 97. He's 5 months shy of his 98th birthday. So people will be wondering whether he's going to have some time to reflect on whether he should continue driving. But the truth is that the law in this country is that anyone of any age can drive on private roads. You don't even need a license. You can be 10 years old and you can drive on private roads. So whether Prince Philip continues to drive on private land is one thing. But because this accident happened on a public road, many are questioning whether the Queen might put a little bit of pressure on Prince Philip to maybe think about giving up the keys.
All right, take away his license. Julia, thanks very much. ABC's Julia McFarland there in London. And for more on that, any of our top stories, check us out at abcnews.com. I'm Aaron Katersky, New York. Thanks for watching The Debrief on ABC News Live.